So this is a continuation space. I'm going to put some things in Jumbotron, so that's why you're going to hear, a few moments of silence. But let me put the PDF in the Jumbotron as well as the previous space. Just give me 2 seconds. I just put the thread in the Jumbotron of previous spaces, and I'm just looking for the PDF. One second. Boom, found it. All right, so I put the PDF in the Jumbotron as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're reading Maurice Bishop from Grenada after the successful socialist revolution. And he's there speaking in New York about how, because of the success of a Black country engaging in a successful socialist revolution and, lifting his people and their material conditions to a better standard of living, America took that as a direct threat. And so he's here talking and reaching out to the people. In previous speeches, he also mentions, why America took it as a direct threat. One, because it was socialist, of course, but two, because it was a Black country that was socialist. And because many people in Grenada also lived in America. And then at the same time, you had the conditions that paralleled. America was afraid that the Black people within its colonies would rise up and do the same. So, of course, they killed Maurice Bishop, for those that didn't know. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm on page 24, and I'm just going to dive right into it. Again, these spaces are like an hour reading, so this space will end about at 5:02 p.m. Today, too, I'm going to read some speeches from Cabral, and I can't send DMs because I hit my limit, so it'll just be a pop-up space, but of course, all spaces are recorded, so you can listen anytime, and I encourage you all to. It's because of these laws and because of the new environment in the country that so many women have begun to step forward, have begun to assert themselves, have begun to go out and find new jobs, and have begun to get fully involved in production. And that is why so many of them have joined their mass organization, so that today, at this point in time, 1 in every 3 adult women over the age of 16 years old is a member of the National Women's Organization. And in this organization, the women are able to experience training in democracy, training in self-rule, training in acquiring a new confidence. Once every 2 months, they hold their parish meetings. They are also broken up into groups around the country where, among other things, they conduct political education and provide training opportunities. Once in every 2 years at their Congress, all the women have the opportunity of electing delegates. For 6 months before the Congress, they have the opportunity to discuss the new program for the next 2 years. And then, on the day of the Congress, they elect their entire new leadership by a secret ballot. So, within our mass organizations, the principle of electorality is already entrenched. For the people in general, there have been organs of popular democracy that have been built. Zoning councils, parish councils, work parish councils, farmer councils, where the people come together from month to month. The usual agenda would be a report on programs taking place in the village. Then there would be a report, usually by some senior member of the bureaucracy. It might be the manager of the Central Water Commission, or it might be the manager of the telephone company or the electricity company, or it might be the chief sanitary inspector or the senior price control inspector. And the senior bureaucrat has to go there and report to the people on his area of work and then be submitted to a question and answer session. And after that, one of the top leaders in our country, and usually there is a question and answer time at the end of that also. In this way, our people from day to day and week to week are participating in helping to run affairs in their country. And this is not just an abstract matter of principle, it has also brought practical, concrete benefits to our people. I remember a worker parish council in August 1981. The workers were in a real storm that night. They were complaining about the private bus drivers, and they were saying that the problem with the bus route or the problem with the bus service is that all 6 or 7 buses pass at the same time on the same route, which, by the way, is true because they are speeding and trying to catch all the passengers. And these bus drivers have been the most difficult people to organize. You can sit down and talk until you're blue in the face about the need for routes and the need for schedules. So the people were complaining that night, and they said it had resulted very often in them reaching work late. And there was a second complaint. They were saying that because of the half price for the school children, the bus drivers were refusing to pick up their children. So the children had to walk to school in the rain or in the sun. So they insisted and demanded that we get some buses to start a public bus service. Now, that is August 81. The financial year is already 8 months gone. The budget has been set. But because of the pressure and the demands, we were forced to go and find money wherever we could and buy 26 new buses to start a public transport service for the people. There's applause. So this concept of democracy and our approach to human rights is one that has stressed solving these problems and the involvement of our people in the participatory way from day to day and week to week. Critics of Grenada's revolution have also raised over and over again the question of our relations with Cuba as a second one of these red herrings. Every now and then, when the red herring of detainees and elections and the press is finished, you will hear them say, Soviet and Cuban satellite. You hear them say that the links with Cuba are such that it is dangerous to the security of the region. What do we say on this question? We say, first of all, that yes, we have warm fraternal relations with the government and people of Cuba. That is true. Applause. We say, secondly, that to us, this is a matter of fundamental principle, and that there are at least 3 very good reasons why we will always have good relations with the government and people of Cuba. The first reason, we see Cuba as part of our Caribbean family of nations. One of the greatest curses of colonialism was that they divided the regions according to different metropolitan centers. They taught us different languages. And then they made a great play of the fact that you are Dutch speaking, you are Spanish speaking, you are French speaking, you are English speaking, and more recently, you are American speaking. And based on this linguistic nonsense, they taught us to hate each other. When we are growing up in school, they used to make us believe that the sun sets only in England, and we used to be made to go down to Queen's Park on the Queen's birthday and stand up in the hot sun all day. And at the end of that day, we're hot and sweaty and tired, and they give us a bun. And I remember the St. John's Ambulance Brigade stop on the corner in case you faint. They catch you quick. I know the first time I realized just how deep this foolishness went and the extent to which they were miseducating us and trying to make us into little black Englishmen is when I arrived in England to study law in 1963. One of my first and greatest experiences, shocking experience, traumatic, was when I went somewhere one day. The national anthem started to play. Poor little black me. I jump up fast. When I look around, me only one standing up, every Englishman sitting down. You know, like old calypso singer Mighty Sparrow, Sparrow is such a great Grenadian, so articulate. Sparrow points out in one of his best songs that the way they were educating us, they were really educating us to make us into fools. They tell us if you're speaking Dutch, you're the best. And if it's English, you're the best. French is the best. Spanish is the best. American is the best. And all of us hating each other. When in fact, we are one people from one Caribbean with one struggle and one destiny. Applause. We see it, therefore, as one of our historic duties and responsibilities to pull down these artificial barriers of colonialism and to develop the oneness and that unity that we nearly lost. We believe it is critically necessary to have close relationships with all of our neighbors. That is why I've done state visits to Mexico, to Venezuela, to Panama, to Cuba, to Nicaragua, to Ecuador. The reason has been a conscious attempt on the part of this new government to try to build those bridges and to make sure that all of this alienation of the past disappears. The second reason is we are a non-aligned country. We believe in non-alignments. And to us, non-alignment means that you have the right to choose your own friends. Non-alignment to us means that we have the right and the duty to diversify and expand our relationships and our friendships around the world. Non-alignment to us is not something that implies neutrality. Non-alignment is not meant to make you into a political eunuch that can't speak. Non-alignment is meant to make you speak out loud and clear for what you believe in. And we have principles we believe in. Applause. Just a reminder, so I'm reading a speech that Maurice Bishop did in New York to the U.S. workers. There is also a third reason we will always have relations, warm, fraternal, close relations with the people and government of Cuba. And that is our admiration and our respect for the internationalism and the achievements of the Cuban people. Applause. Whether they like it or not, Cuba was the first revolution in this hemisphere to have succeeded. And if there was no Cuban revolution, there could have been no Grenada or Nicaraguan revolution. Applause. Whether they like it or not, Cuba was the first country in this hemisphere to give a sound licking to U.S. imperialism at the Bay of Pigs. Again, the crowd is applauding. Whether they like it or not, Cuban internationalist soldiers have been the first in the world to charge the racist South African monster and to face it with arms in their hands while defending Angola. Chants of Viva Cuba, over and over again from the crowd. Oops, sorry. There we go. And if there were no Cuban internationalist troops in Angola, how long ago would the South African apartheid monster have overrun Angola with the assistance of several Western powers? Cuba is a great stabilizing factor in that Angola equation. And that is why when they come up with the hypocrisy of linkage and say that for Namibia to get independence, Cuban troops have to leave, we who are in the third world understand that and have seen their bluff and will fully back the Cuban soldiers and the Angolan people in ensuing that they stay in Angola. They can choose their South African and their Haitian and Chilean and South Korean and every dictator friend they wish. That is okay. But we can't choose our friends because we too small and poor to have the right to choose. They like to talk a lot about backyard and front yard and lake. Grenada is nobody's backyard and part of nobody's lake. The crowd applauded. The more desperate that imperialism gets, the more it comes up with the most vulgar and hostile measures to try to keep the poor, oppressed people of the world who are trying to win their national liberation and to build their own future down. Think of Nicaragua. Nicaragua is a country invaded over the years 2-3 times in the century by the United States. Nicaragua, a country that has been under the brutal heel of the Somozas for over 40 years. Nicaragua, a country that, just like the Americans 200 years ago, finally resorted to their supreme right to overthrow their repressors and murderers and to take their destiny into their own hands. And when the people of Nicaragua, when the sons and daughters of Sandino assumed their liberation, there's part of this book where the words are blurred out, so I'm trying to read it. When they won, I can't read that word because it's worn out. Some of my books, when I scan them, I read them so much that I literally wear out the words. Was that the crime they committed after? Their crime has to be bold and managed and fresh enough to say that their resources belong to them and to say that they want to build their country in their own way, to say that they want to choose their own friends and to say that they are going to build their own country after their own image and likeness and not after the image and likeness of somebody else. And because of that, you have the situation where today, the most vulgar, shameless acts of the last year or so can people only in comparison to what is happening in El Salvador, or what happened in the Middle East here in Lebanon when the Palestinian people were slaughtered, the most vulgar, shameless acts of open CIA activity in their country. The most open, vulgar, shameless act of even admitting that not only will they resort to covert actions, but if necessary, they will publicly back overt acts against the Nicaraguans. The shamelessness can only be exceeded by the way in which sections of the media have chosen to respond, to pretend that the Nicaraguans are losing popular support, to pretend that these murderers, I'm not going to be able to see that word either, of freedom fighters, to pretend that these butchers who will not show bombs on women and children as they're passing So I remember this part. Unfortunately, the words have run away. So basically, what he's describing is how America and its imperialist ventures, will bomb and kill many of people, but then turn around and call you the terrorist and the bad person for wanting to be free and have a life free of death and seeing dead children on the street and seeing people maimed and murdered and raped. You wanting to be free of that is wrong. But their conquest over you and the takeover of your country and the exploitation of its people, that is justified. That's basically what that paragraph is saying. And I just want to say real quick too, as I read Maurice Bishop and think about him and how courageous he was, because and the people of Grenada, of course, collectively, all courageous because they knew what was coming when they had started the socialist revolution process. They knew that America would step in with repression, violent repression. And instead of cower and capitulate, collectively, this tiny island of Black people decided that not only are they going to fight for what they built and protect, but that they're also going to tell the world their story. So when Maurice went on these tours to talk about, look, this is what we've accomplished. This is what we had to do in order to accomplish it. And here's what America is trying to do to destroy it. When he called out the hypocrisy, but then also tied it to the global struggle, he knew about what was going on in Angola. He knew what was going on in Cuba. He knew what was happening across the global South and was able to tie it together under the umbrella of internationalism. So important. But when he did this again, and when the people did this, I just admire it, because you say that, no, not only am I not going to capitulate to the Western hegemony and its imperialist, violent nature, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you're doing. That is so honorable and principled. He was killed for this, but he was a martyr and a hero. And as I read his words, I just hope that that he's remembered and we spread the word of people like him so that they don't be forgotten. And perhaps the only good thing that has come out of this recent episode, sisters and brothers, is the fact that for the first time in a long time, the people of Latin America themselves have tried to find solutions to the problems. That has been the historic meaning of the get-together of Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, and Panama on Contradora to launch the Contradora Initiative. Because what this Contradora Initiative is all about is really extremely important for us. It says, first of all, that we, the people of Latin America and the Caribbean, will try to solve our problems ourselves. The crowd applaud. It says, secondly, that we do not accept the use of violence as a means of settling our disputes. It says, thirdly, that we must always sit down and engage in negotiations and discussions before taking any other measures. And it says, fourthly, that we are not prepared to accept that any country in our region, far less any country outside our region, has the right to interfere in the internal affairs of another country. And even though this Contadora initiative is fast becoming all things to all men, you hear everybody saying, yes, they're backing Contadora, which must mean that some people are trying to use Contadora in ways different than the original objectives were intended. Nonetheless, it is an historic first step. But these people have also thrown out another allegation against Grenada. I want to deal with it, but I know people want to go home. It's getting late. And then the crowd shouts, no, no, because they want him to keep talking. He goes on, he says, the other allegation concerns the question of our international airport project. This one is, of course, the most comical one of all. According to the formulators of this famous theory, Grenada's international airport is now going to become a military base and will now become a strategic jump-off point from where we can launch an attack on the great, big, powerful, mighty United States. He looks as if we have become a superpower. Everyone busts out laughing because, of course, again, as we read in previous books and spaces, America uses this strategy often, saying, oh, look how dangerous these people are. But if you look at the reality, it's just so sick. His humor is top notch also. But the reality of the airport, of course, is well known to all those who make those statements. This airport is an ancient dream of the people of the country. Everyone applaud. This international airport has undergone a quarter century of studies. There are more than 6 voluminous reports and studies on the international airport. all previous governments from 1955 have spoken about the need for the airport. And if you understand the situation in our country, that would be no surprise to anybody. The present airport is called Pearls. Pearls has a strip 5,500 feet long. That means only turboprop planes can come in. The turboprop planes that come in carry a maximum of 48 passengers. And better still, these planes can only land during the day between 6 and 6 because there are no night lights. And we cannot put night lights there because the airstrip happens to be conveniently located between the mountain and the sea. And unless we knock down the whole of the island, you cannot put an international airport in Pearls. So basically, he's pointing out how absurd the allegations, the false allegations that United States is making in order to drum up support to take over Grenada and, of course, dismantling their socialist revolutionary process. We had to make a strip of 9,000 feet because of all the manuals that were done by European and American companies. I can think of McDonald's, McDonwell. I don't know why I'm tripping over that word. It's actually not hard. I could think of McDonald. There we go. Douglas. People who do the DC-8. I could think of Boeing and so on. They have produced manuals saying that length of strip is required if their planes are to land. So unless we, born big and stupid, you cannot expect us to put down a strip that planes that can only carry people, normal jet planes, won't be able to use. This famous military base, the crowd laughs. Let me tell you about it in a different way. I'll give you a little joke about it. After President Reagan's statements, one television crew, ABC in fact, came to the country, and they wanted to do an interview, and they had a big fact file with all the questions. But the main question focused around the fact that we were building a sophisticated military base, or at least a sophisticated military strip. So we said, okay, let's go down the airport and take some photographs. So these people went down there, and they took photographs. They discovered that the airport had become the #1 tourist attraction of the country. Every tourist on the island was taking a peek. They discovered at the end of the strip, which is also the end of the peninsula, at least 24 Grenadans go every single evening to fish. They discovered that right at the beginning of the strip, at a distance of this podium to, let's say, the front row of that balcony, a few inches away, is where the medical school with 700 American students live and study. And they discovered that these medical school students, American students, were running up and down the strip, jogging every day and every night. The crowd burst into laughter. So basically, they took the reporters. Sorry, I had to get water. They took the reporters down to this so-called military base that the Americans were accusing Grenada of building in order to like threaten America's I guess, power. And he's like, all right, cool, let's go. And when they go, they see people jogging on this strip. They see people fishing. It's not a military base. So it's just absurd, but just how far America will go in order to just topple a people's self-determination by any means necessary. And again, how important it was for the people of that country and people like a Maurice Bishop who has a way with words to speak truth to power. I'm in awe of the people like this, really. ABC television also discovered that there was, in fact, a terminal building being constructed because in President Reagan's photograph, the one that spy plane took, there was a nice big cloud covering the terminal building. Quite by accident, of course. But when these people went down, that accident did not take place. So they caught the terminal building. So they came back to put it on Nightline, and the people of America were able to see that here genuinely was an international airport with a full terminal building. But 2 days later, ABC came back, same crew. So I say, what's the problem now, fellows? They say, all right. They say they agree it's not a sophisticated airbase. They won't say that again. They're sorry about that. But they now discover we have sophisticated communication facilities. So we say, all right, we don't know anything about them. We don't know where they are, but feel free to go around the country. If you can find them, we also would like to see them. Everyone busted out laughing. So they spent another day or two going around. They didn't find them. They sent the film back again after asking questions and satisfying themselves that this was also nonsense. Would you believe the next day afterward, they were back again, in other words, 3 times in 6 days, and this time they came back. They said, "We have another question for you. It is not sophisticated military base. It is not sophisticated communications facility, but we understand you all have sophisticated barracks." Again, the crowd starts laughing. Of course, they discovered that this sophisticated barracks that they were talking about was no more than temporary sheds which had been constructed on the airport site in which the Grenadian and the Cuban workers who were building the airport are living. They also discovered that on the same airport site are workers from a British company called Plessy and workers from a Finnish company called Metex, who are down there right now installing the communications equipment, the navigational aids, and the electronics, etc. All the things you need to get an airport functional, working, and living together. They also then discovered that last year, an American company called Lane Dredging from Miami spent 9 months in Grenada helping to build this famous military base. The crowd busted out laughing again. That this company was dredging a selection of the sea where the strip has to pass, a section called Hardy Bay, and therefore, for those 9 months, they too were working and living with Grenadian and Cuban workers building the airport. So I said to these fellows, "Well, look, as you know, Grenada relies in part on tourism. So we don't mind seeing you all again, but I'm sorry, we don't mind seeing you all again. I don't mind if they send you back down tomorrow. But if you're coming back down, uh, if you're coming back down tomorrow, try to bring a few more ABC people." And the crowd busted out laughing and cheering. And secondly, if they would tell you it's sophisticated something else, at least make sure they come up with something better than saying sophisticated pants or socks or shoes. It had really become that ludicrous. This international airport project, as we see it, is the gateway to our future. As we see it, it is what alone can give us the potential for economic takeoff. As we see it, it can help us to develop the tourist industry more. It can help us to develop our agro industry more. It can help us to export our fresh fruits and vegetables better. As every Grenadian who has gone back home and has anybody here in this audience who has ever traveled to Grenada will know, coming to Grenada right now is a literal nightmare. Coming to Grenada right now is like a labor of love. You have to be a martyr to want to come here. The amount of trouble you will make you sick. The amount of trouble will make you sick. And what this airport will do is remove all of that trouble and inconvenience and allow our people to fly straight into our own airport. The crowd applauded and cheered. That is why we have made an exception this year. Usually every year at the end of December, we announce what the next year will be called, the year of education or production or whatever it is. But last month, 6.5 months ahead of schedule, we announced to our people what the name of the next year would be. So they can so they can start from now to mobilize, including mobilizing overseas around the name, because 1984, next year, will be called the Year of International Airport. Everyone applauded and cheered. And the fact of the matter is, next year is also significant for us because on the 13th of March, 84, it will be the 5th anniversary of the revolution. And as you know, people always make a fuss about the 1st anniversary, about the 5th anniversary, about the 10th anniversary, and so on. So we have reasons to make an extra fuss next year. And therefore, what we want to do during the 5th festival on the 13th March itself is to open our international airport on that date. Everyone cheered. And I want to say to you sisters and brothers here, particularly to our Grenadian nationals, there is a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and excitement building all over the world because all of them want to be the first flight that touched down. When I was in London last month, addressing a rally much like this one, the Grenadians in the audience were all insisting that they will organize an inaugural flight, but the one condition is that they must be the first plane to touch down. So what we have decided to do, because of course we can't have all of them first, is to settle for inaugural flights by zones or by cities. London will have its own inaugural. Liverpool will have its own inaugural. New York, no doubt, will have its own inaugural. Applause from the audience. Washington is going to have its own inaugural. And what it's going to be important, sisters and brothers, is to make sure you get on that inaugural because, as you realize, you will be coming down to see the most widely publicized airport the world has ever known. The crowd applauded. I think we should give a special round of applause to those responsible for the free publicity. The crowd starts laughing. You know, some people have even suggested that the best name we can give the airport is the Ronnie Reagan International Airport. Yo, he's so hilarious. Laughter, shouts of no from the crowd. Of course, they are not serious, but as you know, one of the things that has been launched at home is a competition to find a name for the airport, and we would like our people overseas to also be involved in that competition. Sisters and brothers, I think it's really time to close, and it is. And then the crowd shouts no, and then he goes on to say, long live the people of free Grenada. Long live the workers, farmers, youth, and women of free Grenada. The crowd cheers. He goes on to say, long live the people of the United States. The crowd cheers. Long live Grenada, U.S. relations and friendships. Long live the people of Cuba and Nicaragua. Long live the people of Angola, Mozambique. Long live the people of Palestine. Long live the people of South Africa. Long live the people of El Salvador. Forward ever, backward never. Forward ever, backward never. Forward ever, backward never. One love. And then the crowd stands up and gives him a standing ovation. And that's the end of that speech. Let's see. We have about 30 minutes. I can knock out another one, or at least start on it. I just want to say, though, like, when I read, especially about, Black revolutions, and then especially in the way that they're going over their accomplishments in the planning stages and what they're doing next, like, it helps paint the picture and what it puts you in that moment. Well, me, in that moment, we're like, damn, I wonder what it would be like for us to have, like, a successful liberation movement. And we're in that phase of revolutionary struggle where we're planning, like, okay, y'all, what are we gonna do about transportation? Like, I crave to be in that time, in that moment, and for us to have it globally, worldwide. And as y'all probably already figured out from listening to me talk, I am someone with my head constantly in the clouds. I'm a dreamer. And so I say this, and I really mean it, even though it might sound naive, that I really believe that in our lifetime, we'll see that revolutionary process take place. I really do believe that. So this next speech is Cuba, Nicaragua, Grenada, together we shall win. The following speech by Maurice Bishop was given to a 1980 rally of 1.5 million people in Havana. Esteemed Comrade Fidel Castro, esteemed Comrade Daniel Ortega, beloved revolutionary comrades of free and revolutionary Cuba, I bring you today warm revolutionary greetings from the people of free Grenada. The crowd applauded. This morning, comrades, I was addressing a rally in my own country to honor International Workers' Day, and I left my country sometime after 11 o'clock this morning to travel more than 1,000 miles to come to your country. But even if the distance was 10,000 miles, no force on earth could have stopped me from being here today. The crowd applauded. The unity, the militant solidarity, which unifies our countries, our people's struggles, it is this unity and this solidarity which is today making imperialism tremble, because we recognize in Grenada, just as imperialists recognize, that without the Cuban Revolution of 1959, there could have been no Grenada Revolution, nor Nicaraguan Revolution in 1979. The crowd applauded. It is the Cuban Revolution that has taught the people of Latin America and the Caribbean how to face blockades, how to defeat criminal invasions of their territories. The people of this region have looked at Guyana, they have looked at the Cuba. I'm sorry, my Spanish is so bad. Colonized tongue, I'm telling y'all. They have looked at Ooh, I'm gonna have to skip that one, y'all. They have looked at assassination attempts on their leadership. They remember the October 1976 destruction of their Cubana airliner. They have seen your struggles. They have been inspired by your victories, and they have observed that even in the face of these difficulties, revolutionary Cuba was able to wipe out illiteracy, prostitution, drug taking, and unemployment. They were able to see you build socialism in your small country. They have seen your strides and achievement in health and education. They have seen that today, 21 years after your revolution, your country is able to assist more than 30 countries around the world. And countries like Grenada and Nicaragua will always feel grateful to the people of Cuba and to the Cuban Revolution for their assistance with their doctors, with their teachers, and with their selfless workers. Certainly, we in Grenada will never forget that it was the military assistance of Cuba in the first weeks of our revolution that provided us with the basis to defend our own revolution. Applause. And when imperialism and reaction keep saying to us, Grenada, why do we take arms? Where are the arms coming from? Why should such a small country need so much arms? We always give them the answer our people have given. Whenever mercenaries or foreign aggressors land in our country, they will discover how much arms we have, whether we can use the arms, and where the arms came from as we shed their blood on our soil. I know that's right. The crowd applauded. Our revolution, comrades, has also provided the region and the world with a living legend, with your great and indomitable leader, Fidel Castro. The crowd applauded. Fidel has taught us not only how to fight, but also how to work, how to build socialism, how to lead our country in a spirit of humanity, sincerity, commitment, and firm revolutionary leadership. Oh, the crowd applauds again. It is important to be in revolutionary Cuba at this period in the world history. Today, we can see another crisis in international capitalism. Today, we can see them complaining that their super profits are falling. We can see their interest rate running towards 20%. The school lunches they have been providing their children, even that they have to reduce by over $500 million. Their workers are daily finding that jobs are disappearing, that their more than $33 billion profit on investments around the world demand that they create new tensions in the world so that their economy, which is based on war and armament, would once again flourish. They are also terrified by the victories of the national liberation movements in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, and right here in Latin America. They have looked around and they see that today the struggles of the people of the region are continuing to reach new heights. They look at El Salvador and they recognize that while yesterday it was Cuba, Nicaragua, and Grenada, tomorrow it will undoubtedly be El Salvador. The crowd applauded. So they have decided to step up on their arms supply and their arms race. They have decided to scuttle SALT II and Detente. They have decided to spend this year more than $142 billion on arms. At the same time, the invasions which have characterized their relations with our region over the years, starting with the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, they are shaping now to create new doctrines, to plan new maneuvers, to obtain new bases to strengthen and deepen their military presence in the hopes that this will crush the rising wave of national liberation consciousness that is sweeping our region and the world. Their interventions in Mexico, in Nicaragua, in Colombia, in Panama, in the Dominican Republic, in Haiti, in Honduras, all of these invasions which they have had over the years, they are now preparing once again to embark on new campaign of terror and intimidation of the people of our region. But sometimes it is no longer by direct intervention. Sometimes they rely more on control and manipulation, on the use of threat of force and the techniques of destabilization, on the use of diplomatic pressure, the use of propaganda destabilization, on the policy of economic isolation. But in each case, all of this is meant to lay the basis for a United States organized or backed coup d'etat. In 1954, they succeeded in overthrowing Arbenz in Guatemala. In 1973, they succeeded in overthrowing Allende in Chile. But the one lesson that they have never forgotten and will never forget is that in 1961, they failed when they tried at Grion right here in revolutionary Cuba. The crowd applauded. Today, we can hear them setting up their cries against the revolutionary processes in Nicaragua and Cuba. You can hear them talking about human rights. You can hear them calling for elections even though they won't understand that our revolutions are popular revolutions. You can see them encouraging the ultra-leftists in our countries to take violent action against our peoples. Their propaganda has reached a point where our countries have become electoral issues in the presidential campaigns in that country. At the same time, as usual, the threats against revolutionary Cuba, the continuation of the criminal economic blockade against revolutionary Cuba, the creation of artificial crisis after artificial crisis. First, the question of the Soviet troops in October last year, and now the question of so-called refugees at the point in time. All of this is part and parcel of the imperialist campaign to try to defame Cuban revolution, to try to isolate the Cuban people, to try to lay the basis for an armed invasion or other form of intervention of your beloved country. But in Grenada, we have been using a slogan, and that slogan has been saying that if they touch Cuba or if they touch Nicaragua, then they touch Grenada too. And the crowd applauded. Comrades, as the people who own this region, as the people who belong to these countries, it is for us to decide what we want to do with our lives and our countries. It is for us, the people of the region, to demand whether or not we want to have military bases on our territory. It is for us to decide whether or not we want other people's planes to fly over our countries. And one of the most contemptuous and arrogant acts of imperialism is today to presume that in 1980, not only do they have the right to have a base in Guantanamo, but that they also have a right to operate military maneuvers on the very soil of free and revolutionary Cuba. We, the people of this region, demand that our region is recognized and respected as a zone of peace. We demand an end to all military task force and air and sea patrols of our region. We demand that the people of the region must be free from aggressive military harassment of any military power. We demand an end to the Monroe Doctrine and to the Carter Doctrine and all other doctrines which are aimed at perpetuating interventionism or backyardism in the region. There must be an end to all attempts to use the so-called peacekeeping apparatus of the Organization of American States to militarily intervene in the region and to hold back progressive and patriotic movements. We also call today that the right to self-determination for all peoples in the region must be recognized and accepted. We today renew our call for the independence of the sister people of Puerto Rico. The crowd applauded. We today insist that all of the people of the region in the 25 colonial countries which still exist, English, Dutch, French, and American territories, we demand the right to independence for the peoples of those countries. We demand that a principle of ideological pluralism must be respected and practiced by imperialist powers. We must have the right to build our processes in our own way, free from outside interference, free from all forms of threats or attempts to force us to accept other people's processes. Today, we insist that there must be an end to the invasions, an end to the landing by Marines, an end to the gunboats, an end to the Playa Girón, an end to the slaughters and massacres of our brothers and sisters. We call also for an end to the arming and financing of counter-revolutionary and anti-popular, anti-democratic, or anti-progressive regimes. There must be an end to the manipulation of regional and world tensions for electoral purposes. The future of the region and the future of the world, the question of world peace, cannot be compromised because of any election, no matter whose election. There must, therefore, be respect for the sovereignty, legal equality, and territorial integrity of the countries of our region. It's clear today, comrades, that the desperate plans of imperialism can be defeated once again, once we remain organized, vigilant, and demonstrate firm and militant anti-imperialist solidarity. We look to the people of Cuba. We look to your revolution and your leadership to ensure that the revolutionary process in the Caribbean and Central America region continues to go forward with strength. We salute you, the freedom-loving people of revolutionary Cuba. We salute your great and revolutionary leader, Comrade Fidel Castro. The crowd applauded. Long live the freedom-loving people of revolutionary Cuba. Long live the Communist Party of Cuba. Long live Comrade Fidel Castro. Long live the Nicaraguan Revolution. Long live the Sandinista Liberation Front. Long live the national liberation movements. Long live the socialist world. Long live the Grenadian Revolution. Long live the militant unity and solidarity of workers internationally. Cuba, Nicaragua, Grenada, together we shall win. And the crowd applauded and gave him a standing ovation. And that's the end of that one. I actually got time for another one. I can't tell you, like, how therapeutic it is for me to read, like, revolutionary content. I'm just telling y'all, it does everything for my spirit. Like, as I read, I just imagine him talking to a podium of people who not too long ago probably was wondering if they would ever see this day. Could you imagine that? Like, think about us and where we are now and what in the horrible events we're witnessing. And then like imagine that, I don't know, we wake up one day and we're at like some kind of communal tribunal trying to figure out how we're going to betterly make efficient our food networks without like that fear and that oppression and exploitation from corporations and from an oppressive government because we dismantled all that. I imagine that shit all the time and literally gets me through the days, you know, just to be upfront, right? Like today is especially hard for me. When I read this stuff, I understand how people can feel like hopelessness because it just seems so heavy. I'm not exempt from that. I'm not exempt from that at all. But again, reading where Black people globally have made strides and have done amazing things despite a global white supremacist power, it should give you hope. It gives me hope, and it paints that picture that not only is it possible, but I really know that we'll see that in our lifetime. I'll stop wasting time and I'll go on to the next speech. Sorry. So here's another speech by Maurice Bishop. Also, too, I encourage y'all to go on YouTube, and Afro Marxist has a channel where a lot of these speeches are. Well, not these particular in this book, but other Maurice speeches, but also too to look up the history of Grenada. There is a lot to learn, and it's unfortunate that this isn't common knowledge, even among leftists and those who study revolution. Oftentimes overlook Black resistance struggles and lose a lot of knowledge that can actually help catapult us into a very progressive and strategy on the liberation front. We need to pay attention to Black struggles and know them very well and study them the way we study like a Marx or any other theorist. Again, I'm going to do my part to make those things more accessible. So this speech might be the last one. I'm going to see with like what time we end. So this one is called The Statement by the Cuban Government and the Cuban Communist Party. The following is a text of an October 20th, 1983 declaration issued in the name of the Cuban Communist Party and the Revolutionary Government of Cuba, followed by a brief decree by the Council of State. The statements were transcribed and translated by Intercontinental Press of a broadcast over Radio Havana. All right. As had now become totally clear for some weeks and perhaps months, a deep-going conflict has been unfolding in the ruling party in Grenada and its leadership. When Maurice Bishop, the principal leader of the party and the prime minister of Grenada, made a brief stop of just 36 hours in Cuba between the evening of Thursday, the 6th of October, and the morning of Saturday, the 8th. After official visits to Hungary and Czechoslovakia, he made not the slightest mention in his conversations with Comrade Fidel and other Cuban leaders of the serious discussions and differences that were taking place inside the New Jewel movement, the name by which the leading party of his country is known. Thus, he provided a great proof of dignity and respect for his own party and for Cuba. All the topics of conversation revolved around Cubans' collaboration with Grenada, the efforts at cooperation carried out by the Grenadian delegation in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, with the results of which Bishop felt broadly satisfied, and other international themes. On Friday, October 7th, Fidel accompanied Bishop on a tour of important installations that are under construction in Cienfuegos. I know I said that wrong and I apologize. Showing him the progress of our development plans and the excellent quality of our workers, with whom both leaders had lengthy dialogues. A few days later, on Wednesday, October 12th, our embassy in Grenada reported the surprising and disagreeable news that deep divisions had surfaced in the Central Committee of the party in Grenada. During the morning of that day, Bishop himself communicated to the embassy regarding the differences that had arisen some time before. He said that they were being discussed and that the efforts were being made to resolve them, but that he had never imagined the seriousness they were going to take on during his absence. He simply stated the differences and did not request any opinion or cooperation on our part in trying to overcome them. Once again, showing his great respect for Cuba's international policy and for the internal affairs of his own party. During the afternoon, it was learned that Bishop's adversaries had gained a majority in the Central Committee of the party, as well as in the political apparatus of the army, of the security force, and that Bishop had been removed from his post in the party and put under house arrest. As it was a purely internal problem, despite our friendship for Bishop and our confidence in his integrity and his leadership abilities, the Cuban government and party instructed our representatives in Grenada that complying fully with the principles and norms of Cuba international policy, they should absolutely refrain from involving themselves in internal affairs of the party and of Grenada. News went on arriving continually from our embassy during the following days about the positions and arguments of the two sides involved in the conflict. In our opinion, what was really involved was not principal differences, but rather conflicts of personality and conceptions of leadership method, from which other subjective factors were not absent. On Saturday, October 15th, Comrade Fidel sent a message to the Central Committee of the New Deal movement expressing with full clarity Cuba's position, which is guided by the principle of absolutely abstaining from involvement in the internal affairs of a party or country. He expressed at the same time his deep concern that the division that had arisen could do considerable damage to the image of the revolutionary process in Grenada, both inside the country and abroad. In Cuba itself, where Bishop was highly esteemed, it would not be easy to explain the facts. Hope was held out that the difficulties could be overcome with the greatest of wisdom, sincerity, loyalty to principles, and generosity. At bottom, Cuba's concerns centered on preventing the events from taking on the character of a violent and bloody confrontation. In his message, Fidel also stated that Cuba's collaboration would be maintained as a commitment to the people of Grenada, independently of changes that might occur in the leadership of the party and the country, since it was a purely internal question. For several more days, the situation remained at an impasse. At certain moments, it seemed that an honorable, intelligent, and peaceful solution could come about. It was clear that the people were in favor of Bishop and were calling for his presence. The Western press launched all kinds of speculation about the events. We did not say a single word in order to avoid having our public statements appear as interference in the internal affairs of Grenada, in view of our close, broad, and fraternal relations with that sister country. In that way, we had complied rigorously with our principles of respect for the internal affairs of fraternal parties and countries. Yesterday, October 19th, during the morning, news began to arrive that the workers had gone on strike and that the people had taken to the streets in support of Bishop. In a massive demonstration, they arrived at his residence where they freed him from house arrest. It seems, since the reports are still imprecise, that a military installation was occupied by the people. The army sent personnel to the area. It is said that the army fired against the demonstrators, causing deaths and injuries, retook the installation, and arrested numerous persons. Of Bishop's fate and that of other leaders who were with him, there was no news. In the afternoon, the dramatic outcome became known. An official communication announced the death of Maurice Bishop, Prime Minister, Unison Whiteman, Minister of Foreign Relations, Jacqueline Kreft, Minister of Education, Vincent Noel, First Vice President of the Trade Union Federation of Grenada, Norris Bain, Minister of Housing, and Fitzroy Bain, General Secretary of the Agricultural Workers Union. It has still not been possible to determine exactly the actual way in which Bishop and the other leaders died. Bishop was among the political leaders who most enjoyed sympathy and respect among our people for his talent, his simplicity, his revolutionary sincerity and honesty, and his proven friendship for our country. Besides that, he enjoyed great international prestige. The news of his death stirred the leadership of our party, and we rendered the deepest tribute to his memory. It is most unfortunate that the differences among the Grenadian revolutionaries climaxed in this bloody drama. No doctrine, no principle or position held up as revolutionary, and no internal divisions justifies atrocious proceedings like the physical elimination of Bishop and the outstanding group of honest and worthy leaders killed yesterday. The death of Bishop and his comrades must be clarified, and if they were executed in cold blood, the guilty ones deserve to be punished in an exemplary way. Imperialism will now try to make use of this tragedy and the grave errors committed by the Grenadian revolutionaries in order to sweep away the revolutionary process in Grenada and subject it once again to neocolonial and imperial domination. The situation is most difficult and complex. Only a miracle of common sense, equality, and wisdom on the part of the Grenadian revolutionaries and of sincerity in the reaction and response of the international progressive movement can still salvage the process. No step must be taken that would aid imperialism in its plans. In Grenada, many Cuban doctors, teachers, technicians, and various kinds, and hundreds of construction workers are collaborating and providing essential services to the people and in the development projects that are vital to the economy. Though profoundly embittered by the events, we will take no precipitate. We will take no. Oh, I'm so sorry. I lost my place. The profoundly embittered events, we will take no participate. There you go. Step with regard to technical and economic collaboration that could affect essential services or economic interests vital to the people of Grenada, for whom we have sincere and deep feelings of admiration and affection. After the tragic outcome yesterday, we will continue following the development of events closely. We will maintain the strict principle of not involving ourselves in the internal affairs of Grenada, and we will take into account, above all, the interest of Grenadian people in matters of economic and technical collaboration if that is possible in the new situation. But our political relations with the new figures in Grenada leadership will have to be subjected to serious and profound analysis. Nonetheless, if the Grenadian revolutionary process manages to be preserved, we will do whatever it is possible to help. Let it be hoped that the painful events that have taken place cause all the revolutionaries of Grenada and the world to reflect deeply, and that the concept prevail that no crime must be committed in the name of the of the revolution and freedom. The Council State, making use of the powers conferred upon it, has decided to issue the following decree. First, to declare 3 days of official mourning, beginning at 6 a.m. tomorrow, October 21st, for the death of the Prime Minister of Grenada, Comrade Maurice Bishop, which occurred yesterday afternoon. Second, that the national flag remain at half-staff at public buildings and military installations during the period of official mourning. Third, that the ministers of the Revolutionary Armed Forces and of Foreign Relations take responsibility for carrying out the proclamation of this decree. This is from Fidel Castro, President of the Communist State. So I got 2 minutes left. There is still a section on here, but I'm going to save it for the next space. So the next space will probably be really short because it's just a few pages that's left. Let me take a look. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and finish it, if y'all don't mind. I'm sorry, I don't see like the screen, so I can't see if everyone's thumbs upping, but hopefully y'all don't mind if I just take a couple more minutes over an hour to finish this. So this part is called Grenada, Why U.S. Wants to Destroy Its Example for Workers and Farmers by Steve Clark. Washington's invasion of Grenada is aimed at finishing off once and for all, the workers and farmers government that came to power there in March 1979 through a popular anti-capitalist revolution. It is part of the escalating efforts by the U.S. ruling class to halt and roll back the advance of the American Socialist Revolution, opened by the victory of the Cuban workers and farmers in 1959, and given a powerful new impulse by victories in Nicaragua and Grenada 20 years later. In launching this bloody onslaught, U.S. imperialism has taken advantage of the devastating blow dealt to the Grenadian Revolution October 19th by the execution of Prime Minister Maurice Bishop and 5 other outstanding revolutionary leaders of the New Deal movement. Foreign Minister Unison Whiteman, Housing Minister Norris Bain, Education Minister Jacqueline Kreft, and Union leader Vincent Noel and Fitzroy Bond. This crime against the Grenadian Revolution by the new military council has been denounced by revolutionary leaders of the working class movement and anti-imperialist struggles around the world. If the current invasion succeeds in imposing a foreign occupation of Grenada, the imperialist forces will install a capitalist regime subservient to Washington, a regime like the dictatorship of Eric Gary overthrown by the Grenadian people in 1979, or like the 7 Caribbean governments participating in Washington's counter-revolutionary assault. Washington was to forestall the reemergence of revolutionary leadership to replace Bishop and the other fallen NJM leaders, to prevent further mass mobilizations such as those that occurred in support of Bishop and the revolution. The depth of the popular support for the anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist course of such leaders as Bishop was dramatically demonstrated during the week leading up to the execution. As the October 20 statement, the Cuban government and Communist Party noted, it was clear that the people were in favor of Bishop and had taken to the streets in support of him. Further testimony to this support was the very fact that the military officers who toppled the People's Revolutionary Government felt that they could only hope to stabilize their power by beheading the revolutionary leadership in a bloodbath. The widow of one of the slain leaders was reported that Bishop and 5 other NJM leaders surrendered peacefully to the military authorities following a mass demonstration of supporters October 19th. According to her account and those of others on the scene, the 6 leaders were then taken inside a building and shot. These eyewitness reports belie the claim by General Hudson Austin over radio that evening that the NJM leaders were killed during a gun battle initiated by Bishop's supporters, as well as the slander that Bishop had linked up openly with counter-revolutionaries in order to wipe out the entire leadership of the party and the army. Bishop had linked up, in quotes, with the workers and farmers who made the revolution. It is Austin and his military council that have wiped out virtually the entire top leadership of the New Jewel movement. Austin's demagogic attempt to wrap his murderous actions on the mantle of defending the revolution was clearly given no credence by the working people of Grenada. The new regime could not mobilize any popular support during the week leading up to the executions. Armored military vehicles fired into the crowd of Bishop supporters, kidnapped and wounding many participants. And the first decree of the council was a 4-day, round-the-clock curfew with warnings that violators would be shot on sight. The message to the Grenadian people could not have been any clearer. Maurice Bishop was placed under house arrest and then killed in cold blood. Now, the Grenadian people were under house arrest with the same fate awaiting them should they defy the council. What happened on March 13, 1979, on this tiny island that put such a scare into the U.S. government and the capitalist rulers of representatives? On that day, the workers and farmers of Grenada toppled the corrupt neocolonial dictatorship of Eric Gary. Gary had used the thugs of his feared and hated Mongoose Gang to brutalize and murder opponents of his anti-working class policies. His government served only his own extensive capitalist interests and those of a handful of other wealthy Grenadians, keeping the country subordinate to British and U.S. imperialism. During the 1970s, the New Jewel movement was formed and gained growing mass support through several broad-based struggles for democratic rights, improved conditions for workers and farmers, and freedom from imperialist domination. In the weeks leading up to March 13, 1979, NJM, the New Jewel movement leaders, learned of a plot by Gary to assassinate them while he was out of the country. The revolutionists prevented this massacre by organizing a successful armed takeover of the True Blue Army barracks and of the island's sole radio transmitter. An appeal for mass support over the occupied radio station brought the Grenadian people into the streets by tens of thousands, occupying the police station, other strategic points, and insurgents' victory. The New Jewel movement took the lead in establishing a people's revolutionary government, with one of the founding leaders, Maurice Bishop, as prime minister. The new government was politically independent of both the imperialist and local Grenadian capitalist classes, basing itself instead on the workers and farmers. It completely dismantled Gary's army and officer corps, building a new army and militia. From its first day in power, the revolutionary government began to implement popular measures to upgrade health and education, guarantee labor rights, improve the conditions of small farmers, ensure equal treatment of women, and upgrade their position in society, and spur economic development. Grab some water right quick. The Grenadian Revolution, like the Cuban Revolution 20 years earlier, and the Nicaraguan Revolution a few months later, was radical, anti-capitalist revolution, Starting from the organization of toilers to combat imperialist domination and establish democratic liberties, the new government laid the foundation for working people to begin the transition from capitalist property relations to the establishment of a workers' state based on nationalized property and economic planning. With the working people, we made our popular, anti-imperialist, and democratic revolution. Prime Minister Bishop explained, with them, we will build and advance to socialism and final victory. The establishment of the workers' and farmers' government was the first fruit of that anti-capitalist revolution, an indispensable instrument of the toilers to carry out the expropriation of the exploiters. It overthrew the political dictatorship of the capitalist minority in Grenada, replacing it with the opening stage of what Marxists call the dictatorship of the proletariat, that is, political rule by and in the interest of the workers and poor farmers, the toiling majority. The Grenadian capitalists and also some U.S. and other imperialist economic interests retained substantial property holdings in agriculture, industry, and commerce, but they no longer held political power. They could no longer dictate that the government and state would act to defend profits over the needs of the workers and farmers. Still ahead of the revolution was the task of breaking the economic power of the capitalist class and consolidating a workers' state. Bishop and the neutral movement leadership sought to lead this transition in a way that would be least destructive for the Grenadian people. They understood that it would take time, organization, education, and discipline for the working class to prepare itself and its allies, the small farmers, to administer an entire society and all the industrial, agricultural, and commercial enterprises that make it up. It would also take time for the new government to build up the infrastructure of roads, new plants, equipment, and administrative and scientific know-how to begin solid economic growth on which any lasting betterment of living conditions had to be based. The gains of the first years of the revolution already showed big strides along this road. The state-owned sector was increasingly taking the lead in the island's economic expansion and development. Prior to this month's events, the capitalist press in the United States and elsewhere almost universally labeled Bishop and the entire neutral movement leadership as dangerous Marxists and proxies for Cuba and the Soviet Union. When news of the divisions inside the government came out, however, the media began peddling speculation that the course followed by Bishop had become more moderate and not to the liking of the more Marxist figures in the New Jew movement, alleging backed by Cuba. On October 20th, New York Times article reporting Bishop's death, for example, chalked up the events in part to dispute over the Prime Minister's policy of encouraging private industry to help improve the island's economy. These labels, bandied about the capitalist press, hard line versus soft line, moderate versus radical, less Marxist versus rigid Marxist, are intended to Sorry, that was a phone call. Hopefully y'all can still hear me. Let me check. All right. The labels bandied about the capitalist press, hardline versus softline, moderate versus radical, less Marxist versus rigid Marxist, are intended to confuse and disorient readers. They are a fake and a fraud. How quickly and by what means to carry out a transformation of property relations cannot be measured against some gauge from less Marxist or more Marxist. Following the October 1917 revolution in Russia, the Bolshevik leadership wrote Lenin in 1929, made an attempt to pass as gradually as possible, breaking up as little of the old as possible to the new socialist relations. There were those in the party whose erroneously opposed the course, but they were not more Marxist than Lenin. Similarly, the revolutionary leaders of the Nicaraguan workers and farmers government have so far left much industry and substantial landholdings in private hands, while declaring socialism to be their goal and taking important steps toward the consolidation of worker states. The question for a revolutionary leadership of the working class, whether in Russia, Nicaragua, or Grenada, is not how fast to move in the abstract, but how to prepare, educate, and organize the working population to run society in their own class interest. That will be determined by many factors: material conditions, the relationship of class forces at home and internationally, and the capacities and experience of the leadership. It is wrong to think that a revolution is like instant coffee. You just throw it in a cup and it comes out presto. Bishop explained in an interview with Intercontinental Press in July 1980, Bishop's supposedly less Marxist position on the pace of international internationalizations is just one example of a broadside disinformation campaign in the capitalist press. It is reminiscent of the campaign earlier this year around the assassination of Anaya Montes and suicide of Salvador Caprio, two top leaders of the Salvadorian revolutionary movement. There, too, false charges were made of Cuban involvement in foul crimes, and meaningless labels were slapped on individuals and political currents. In both cases, the fundamental aims of the bourgeois propaganda machine have been the same. First, the rulers hope to discredit revolutionary struggles and their leaders in the eyes of working people throughout the world, thereby making it easier to justify direct or indirect U.S. military invasions such as that now underway against Grenada. Second, the rulers hope that their rumors and false information will foment confusion, demoralization, and divisions among revolutionary fighters and their domestic and international backers. The conscious aim is to disrupt collaboration and solidarity and to raise doubts about whether it is possible to stand up and win and fight for a better world. From their own class standpoint, the U.S. capitalists agreed with Fidel Castro's 1980 statement that Grenada, Cuba, and Nicaragua are three giants of the Caribbean standing up on the very thresholds of imperialism. Bishop pointed to one reason why the U.S. rulers have been particularly worried about Grenada when he spoke to an audience of 2,500 people in New York City in June 1983. He cited a State Department report that, according to Bishop, made this point that Grenada revolution is, in one sense, even worse than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speak English and therefore can communicate directly with the people of the United States. As the crowd rose to its feet for a prolonged ovation, Bishop continued that 95% of our population is Black and can thus have a dangerous appeal to 30 million Black people in the United States. It was that powerful example set by the Grenada Revolution, its leaders, and its accomplishments that the U.S. rulers fear. A central aspect of the bourgeois disinformation campaign is the charge that Cuba and the Soviet Union were behind the killing of Bishop and other New Deal movement leaders. The imperialists hope to justify their false claim that the peoples and governments of Central America and the Caribbean have something to fear from Cuba and the USSR, and therefore need U.S. military protection from such quote-unquote subversions. The imperialists have kept up this campaign of lies and slanders against Cuba, despite an October 20th statement by the Cuban government and party firmly condemning the executions. 3 days of national mourning for these revolutionaries were declared in Cuba, and by the revolutionary government of Nicaragua as well. The ultimate goal of the capitalist disinformation campaign is to convince working people that it is useless to struggle. The cause of freedom, justice, and socialism is not worth living, fighting, and if need be, dying for, because things always go awry. The hope and promise are always betrayed. This was the pitch of an October 21st New York Times editorial headline, Harvest of Failure in Grenada. The editorial concluded that in all too familiar pattern, the populists who led the way to power have now been devoured by hard army and party men. The military regime established over the corpse of the New Deal movement leaders, the editorial claimed, represents a hard look to the demagogic and pro-Soviet Union left. To the recent events in Grenada represent a harvest of failure and a lurch to the left. Just the opposite. It was the achievements of the Grenadian workers and farmers that made imperialism so desperate to reverse the revolution and eliminate its leaders. Whatever the motives of General Austin and company, their actions gave a mighty boost to this reactionary cause. Bishop reviewed the major social accomplishments of the revolution in his New York City speech earlier this year. He also pointed to big strides in economic development to promote the island's income from tourism, agricultural production for the home and export markets, and industrial development. In addition, the revolution has made progress in involving working people in determining and administering the affairs of their country. The workers' and farmers' government immediately granted and enforced labor rights, leading to organizing drives that brought 80% of the workforce into unions. Mass women organizations, youth organizations, and farmers' organizations were launched. Democratic bodies called parish and worker parish councils were set up in workplaces, villages, and neighborhoods. These councils discussed and debated proposed government policies, including its yearly budget and plan, and provided a forum for criticisms and discussions of problems of the revolution. And Bishop announced at the New York meeting that the time has come for us to make another step forward, or another step along the way toward institutionalizing the process that we have been building for 4 years. He said that participation of a draft constitution had begun, laying the groundwork for future elections. These elections, he said, would not replace, but instead institutionalize and entrench the systems of popular democracy established during the first years of the revolution. The goal was the involvement of our people in a participatory way from day to day and week to week, not just the right to put an X next to a Tweedledum or a Tweedledee every 5 years. Sorry, Maurice is just his humor. I just like to take a minute and laugh because we have to remember these people were human like you and me, and yet did amazing and great things. So we're capable of doing the same. This announcement, too, has been picked up by the capitalist press for use in its disinformation campaign. According to press accounts, Bishop had been at odds with other New Jew movement leaders over these plans for the Constitution and elections. There were undoubtedly differences inside the New Jew movement leadership, including serious divisions that intensified in recent weeks. There is no reason, however, to question the judgment of the October 20 Cuban statements that these differences did not involve principal differences, but rather conflicts of personality and conceptions of leadership method, from which other subjective factors were not absent. The day prior to the execution of Bishop, the capitalist media reported on October 17th, radio address by General Austin, given according to him on behalf of the party's Central Committee. According to Austin, while there has been no dispute over the political and economic policies of the party, the Central Committee have voted to expel Bishop from the party to stop the steady growth of one-man rule in our party and country. Austin sought to create the impression that the army was merely acting to ensure implementation of party decisions adopted by a majority led by Deputy Prime Minister Bernard Coard. Several facts should be noted about Austin's October 17 statement and about the persistent reports in the capitalist media and the new military government is being run by Coard. First, when the late Foreign Minister Eunice Whiteman returned to Grenada from New York, where he had addressed the United Nations General Assembly, he phoned the Caribbean News Agency October 18th to report that, contrary to Austin's claim, the New Jew Movement Central Committee had not been meeting in recent days. Moreover, Coard has not been heard from since October 14th, when news of Bishop's house arrest first began to be reported. Coard was not mentioned in Austin's subsequent October 19th radio address announcing the military council, and he was not named as one of the council's 16 members. Whatever further facts turn up about Coard's role in the internal strife in the New Jew movement, it is nevertheless clear that the Cuban statement was correct to stress the disruptive character and tragic results of internal fracture and maneuvering against the New Jew movement's central leadership around Bishop. This ended up paralyzing the party. Whatever the exact sequence of events, this paralysis in turn paved the way for a military takeover, the executions, the devastated conditions of the revolution that made the country so vulnerable to invasion. Cuban Marxists have direct experience with such disruptive leadership methods. At the end of 1961, the July 26 movement, which had led the workers and peasants to victory and to the consolidation of the first workers' state in the Americas, fused with two other parties to form the Integrated Revolutionary Organizations. The new organization secretary of the ORI was Aníbal Escalante, a longtime leader of the Popular Socialist Party, the traditional Moscow-aligned Communist Party. Escalante abused this position to build up a party and state apparatus increasingly composed of PSP cadres, winking at special privileges and bureaucratic practices. He also started a rumor mill belittling the July 26 leaders. The concrete situation in Cuba was quite different from what developed in Grenada, of course. It should be noted, however, that the Escalante grouping circulated the charge that Castro was refusing to function as part of the collective party leadership. It dismissed the popular support for Castro and only July 26 leaders as signs of a personality cult. Get some water. In March 1962, Castro gave a televised speech pointing to the dangerous growth of bureaucracy, privilege, and favoritism fostered by Escalante. The party leadership removed Escalante from his post. On Castro's proposal, the procedure for becoming a party member was changed so that nominations would come from assemblies of the candidates' co-workers. This has remained the procedure ever since. A common bourgeois press speculation at the time, echoed by many in the radical movement internationally, was that more hardline Marxists from the PSP had been taking over, pushing aside the more moderate July 2016. Some groups claiming to be Marxists even lined up with Escalante in the dispute on this basis. A workers' and farmers' government, such as the established in Grenada in March 1979, marks a necessary stage in a socialist revolution, consolidating the toilers' power over reconstructed government and state apparatus. While there are no set timetables or recipes for the transition to a workers' state, the revolution will ultimately either move forward to the exploration of the capitalists and landlords, or it will be driven back, allowing the reestablishment of capitalist class rule. In Russia, in 1917 and 18, and Cuba in 1959 and 60, workers and farmers' government went forward to the consolidation of worker states under revolutionary Marxist leadership. Following World War II, worker states were consolidated in China, Yugoslavia, and other Eastern European countries despite Stalinist leadership that lacked the revolutionary capacities of the Bolsheviks and Cuban parties. A year or two following this victorious struggle in Algeria against French colonial rule, a workers' and farmers' government came into existence there as well. Between late 1963 and mid-1965, that government took increasingly radical anti-capitalist measures against both foreign imperialist and local Algerian holdings. It mobilized the workers and poor peasants to exercise greater control over their society and economy. The left wing of the Algerian leadership, led by head of state Ben Bella, publicly declared its intention to follow the course charted by the Cuban Revolution. The Ben Bella group, however, was not a Marxist leadership like that of the Cuban, Nicaraguan, and Grenada revolutions. In response to resistance by pro-capitalist forces to the radical course of the revolution, Ben Bella facilitated and retreated. He did not rely on mobilization of the workers and poor peasants to defend and extend their gains. As a result, a clique of officers in the Revolutionary Army, which had been built in the course of the anti-colonial struggle, overthrew Ben Bella in June 1965. General Balmadine, who had himself initially been associated with the left wing, replaced Ben Bella. The workers and farmers' government in Algeria had become quite rotted out by the time of the 1965 coup, and the takeover did not necessitate the bloody liquidation of the former leadership. Ben Bella was jailed, but not executed. The new regime was not a rightist government, but sought to dampen popular opposition by claiming to defend certain previous gains and retain an anti-imperialist posture in foreign policy. Nonetheless, the Algerian workers and farmers' government had been overthrown. It was replaced by a radical bourgeois nationalist regime such as those that have come to power in a number of Middle Eastern, African, and Asian and Latin American countries as a result of the usurpage of the colonial revolution since World War II. The course of Grenada revolution since 1979 has been strikingly different from the trajectory of the Algerian workers and farmers' government, above all because of the capacities of the Marxist leadership team of Bishop and other New Deal movement leaders. They were deeply influenced by the experiences and lessons learned from the Cuban Revolution and its proletarian internationalist leadership. The Grenadian Revolution had not rotted out, nor were the workers and farmers demobilized when the events of this month erupted. That is why the new regime had to slaughter the central core of the leadership and subject the masses to hail of bullets and a shoot-to-kill 4-day curfew. This is also why imperialism decided to directly intervene with its own forces. While Washington recognized the serious blow that the revolution had taken, it also recognized that the revolution had not yet been crushed. It is seeking by its own might to hold down the workers and farmers, prevent the reemergence of a revolutionary leadership, and deal the workers and farmers' government a final death blow. Whatever the outcome of the battle between the imperialist forces and the Grenadian people, one thing can be said with certainty. While it might be possible for Washington to roll back the Grenada Revolution for a time, it cannot erase from history the example and rich lessons of the past 4 years. The workers' and farmers' government brought to power by the Grenadian people remains one of the three giants of the Caribbean for revolutionary-minded working people throughout the Americas and the world. Nor can the imperialists sweep away the contribution made by Maurice Bishop and the New Jew movement to the process of constructing a new international revolutionary leadership of the working class and its allies. Bishop, the other slain New Jew movement leaders, and those Grenadians who fell October 19th and are falling today in defense of their country's sovereignty, they join the ranks of martyrs of the international working class movement. Right now, the best tribute we can pay them is to turn our efforts to mobilizing the broadest possible opposition to the U.S. occupation of their homeland and to Washington's efforts to use this criminal invasion to bring closer to direct use of U.S. military power to halt the advance of the socialist revolution in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and throughout the Caribbean and Central America. That's the end of that reading. Again, the PDF is in the Jumbotron, and I encourage people to share it as much as possible and reread over it. And again, there's so many examples of Black revolutionaries and revolutionary movements that we should be learning from right now today. And unfortunately, I can't hold the space that much longer. I got to do something, but later on tonight, I'm going to be reading a book called Return to the Source, Selected Speeches of Amilcar Cabral. Y'all, I fucking love this book, and I think y'all will enjoy it too. His work, again, and the work of a lot of our Black revolutionaries needs to be studied intensely and in a communal way, and I hope I do it justice. Y'all already know I suck at reading, but I'm telling you, I'm going to put so much emotion into this because it means this work is my everything. And yeah, so unfortunately, I can't DM the spaces, but I'm going to be linking up with Mr. JB and others for help. And if y'all can help me out so that we can all enjoy this work is going to be in a couple hours, maybe 3 hours. I'll try to get back home so we can read it together. And again, I just want to say it's okay not to be okay right now. And I can admit that I'm definitely not okay. A lot is going on in this world, and a lot's going on in where I'm working at. I've lost a few comrades recently, and it's hitting hard. So I want y'all to just check on each other. For real, though. Really check on each other. And, let's practice community. And always remember that not only is there hope, but we will see revolution in our lifetime. Let's get free.